She checked her calendar and saw her own funeral, September 30th, 2021. Conference room, B status, attended. But Sarah Whitmore had never scheduled this appointment. She'd never even heard of Riverside Memorial Services, and when she finally Googled the address, her hands started shaking. It was a funeral home, and according to her calendar, she'd already been there. But September 30th was still 16 days away. That's when Sarah scrolled up and found the others. Final paperwork, county records, last visit, plot 227. 4 appointments, all scheduled for dates that hadn't happened yet, all marked as already attended, all created from her own email address at 3 a.m. while she slept. The last event was titled simply, The End. Sarah told herself it was a glitch, some kind of hack, until she found the deleted entries, dozens of them, stretching back through July, medical appointments she'd never made, doctor's visits she couldn't remember, an entire cancer diagnosis documented in perfect detail that she'd somehow lived through and completely forgotten. Or had she? Subscribe now, because what Sarah discovered about her calendar would make her question everything she knew about memory, time, and the line between living and dying. 6 weeks earlier, in late July 2021, Sarah Whitmore had been living what most people would call a perfectly normal life. She was 37 years old, a senior project manager for a mid-sized tech company in Portland, Oregon. Her days consisted of Zoom meetings, spreadsheets, and the organized chaos of raising 2 children with her husband, Tom. Normal, predictable, safe, but normal had been different since March 2020. Like millions of others, Sarah's world had compressed into the walls of her home. Her office became the converted guest bedroom. Her commute became 30 steps down the hallway. The boundary between work and life had dissolved into a blur of notifications and deadlines. She'd adapted, of course. Everyone had, but adaptation came with a cost most people didn't talk about. Time had become strange. Without the physical markers of a daily routine, the drive to work, the lunch break downtown, the Friday happy hours, days bled into one another. Sarah found herself checking her calendar obsessively, not because she had so many appointments, but because she needed to remember what day it was. Tuesday felt like Thursday. August felt like May. The calendar had become more than a tool. It had become her anchor to reality. She used Google Calendar religiously. Every meeting, every errand, every child's activity was logged with obsessive precision. She color-coded everything. Blue for work, green for personal, red for the kids, yellow for household tasks. Tom teased her about it sometimes, calling her Captain Calendar, but she didn't care. In a world that had lost all structure, the calendar gave her control. It told her where she'd been and where she was going. Sarah had always been this way, even before the pandemic. Organization was her superpower. In college, she'd been the one with the detailed study schedule, the meal-prepped lunches, the semester mapped out by week 3. She'd never missed a deadline, never forgotten an appointment, never lost track of anything important. Her friends said she had the memory of an elephant. It was a point of pride. But something had shifted in recent months. Sarah had started noticing gaps. Small ones at first. She'd walk into a room and forget why she'd come. She'd start a sentence and lose the thread halfway through. She'd look at her calendar and see meetings she didn't remember scheduling. Tom said it was stress. Her doctor said it was probably pandemic brain fog, a real phenomenon affecting millions. Nothing to worry about. Just another side effect of living through history. Then came the dreams. They started in mid-July, right around the time her company announced they'd be returning to hybrid work in September. Vivid, cinematic dreams that felt more like memories than imagination. In one, she was sitting in a small, windowless room with pale green walls, signing documents she couldn't quite read. In another, she was walking through a garden she'd never visited, but somehow knew intimately. Each dream ended the same way. She'd look at her watch, realize she was late for something, and wake up with her heart racing. She didn't tell Tom about the dreams. They felt too strange, too personal, like glimpses into someone else's life. But they lingered. Throughout the day, fragments would surface, the smell of lilacs from the garden dream, the sound of a fountain, the feeling of cold metal in her hand. She'd shake her head and return to her color-coded calendar, her anchor, her proof that everything was still under control. By early August, Sarah had developed a new habit. Every morning, before she even got out of bed, she'd check her calendar on her phone. Not because she needed to review her schedule, she already knew it by heart, but because she needed to see it, to confirm it, to verify that today was today, and that yesterday had happened the way she remembered. Tom noticed, but didn't comment. Everyone had their pandemic coping mechanisms. What Sarah didn't know was that her calendar had already begun showing her things that hadn't happened yet. The algorithm had detected patterns in her behavior, rhythms in her data that suggested something inevitable. It had started adding events, subtle ones, appointments that aligned so perfectly with her routine that she assumed she must have created them herself and simply forgotten. The system was learning, and it was preparing her. The first anomaly appeared on August 12, 2021. Sarah had just finished a morning meeting when she noticed an event in her calendar for that afternoon. Health check, Dr. Morrison, $2 p.m. She stared at it for a solid minute, trying to remember when she'd scheduled a doctor's appointment. She didn't have a Dr. Morrison. Her primary care physician was Dr. Patel, and she hadn't seen her since March. She clicked on the event details. The location was a medical building on the east side of Portland, about 20 minutes from her house. The email confirmation was there, dated from 3 weeks ago, sent from the doctor's office to her personal Gmail. But Sarah had no memory of making the appointment. She checked her email archive. Nothing. Just the calendar entry and that single email, sitting in her inbox like it had always been there. Tom suggested she call and cancel, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the efficiency-obsessed part of her brain that hated wasted appointments. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was something deeper, a nagging feeling that she should go, that this appointment was important somehow. She rationalized it. She'd been meaning to see someone about her memory issues anyway. This was probably past Sarah looking out for future Sarah. So she went. Dr. Morrison's office was in a nondescript medical complex that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. The waiting room was empty, except for an elderly man reading a newspaper. Sarah checked in with a receptionist who seemed to be expecting her, which should have been reassuring, but somehow wasn't. She was called back within 5 minutes, as if the entire afternoon had been cleared just for her. Dr. Morrison was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and steady hands. She asked Sarah routine questions about her health, her sleep patterns, her stress levels. Nothing seemed unusual until she pulled up something on her computer and asked, "And how long have you been experiencing the temporal disorientation?" Sarah's mouth went dry. She hadn't mentioned anything about time feeling strange. How did you know about that?" she asked. Dr. Morrison looked at her with sympathy, mixed with something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "You told me," she said simply, gesturing to her screen. "During your intake survey 3 weeks ago, you were quite detailed about the symptoms." She turned the monitor so Sarah could see. There, in a digital form, were paragraphs describing exactly what Sarah had been experiencing, written in her own words, submitted from her email address, time-stamped 3 weeks ago. But Sarah had no memory of writing them. None at all. The appointment lasted 40 minutes. Dr. Morrison ordered blood work to rule out thyroid issues and vitamin deficiencies. She suggested Sarah keep a journal and get more sleep. Standard advice. Nothing alarming. But as Sarah was leaving, Dr. Morrison said something that stuck with her. "Time has a way of catching up with us, Sarah. Sometimes we know things before we consciously realize we know them. Your mind might be trying to tell you something." Sarah drove home in a daze. She tried to convince herself it was simple. She'd scheduled the appointment while half asleep, filled out the survey during insomnia, and forgotten the whole thing. It happened. People did things on autopilot all the time, but that explanation felt thin, like a sheet pulled over something much larger underneath. That night, she opened her calendar to add a reminder about blood work results. That's when she saw it. Another appointment, scheduled for 2 weeks out. Follow-up consultation, Dr. Morrison, August 26th, 2:30 p.m. But she hadn't scheduled a follow-up. Dr. Morrison had said she'd call if the blood work showed anything concerning. Sarah clicked on the event. Like the first one, it had a confirmation email. Like the first one, she had no memory of creating it. She scrolled backward through July, then June, checking for other anomalies. Nothing jumped out. Everything was as she remembered. Work meetings, grocery runs, piano lessons for her daughter Emma. Her perfect, color-coded life. But then she noticed something subtle. The timestamps on some entries seemed off. Events she knew she'd created on Sunday afternoons showed creation dates from Tuesday mornings. Meetings she remembered scheduling during lunch breaks had metadata, suggesting she'd added them at 3 a.m. Sarah closed her laptop and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the act of typing those survey answers, trying to recall the moment she'd clicked schedule for that follow-up appointment. The memories wouldn't surface because they weren't there. And for the first time since the pandemic began, Sarah wondered if her calendar, her anchor, her proof of reality, was showing her something other than the truth. The blood work came back normal. Dr. Morrison called on August 18th to tell Sarah everything looked fine. "Sometimes stress manifests in unusual ways," she said warmly. "I'd still like to see you for that follow-up on the 26th. We can discuss coping strategies." Sarah confirmed the appointment she'd never made. It was already in her calendar anyway, already real, whether she remembered creating it or not. She decided to conduct an experiment. For the next week, she would document every single calendar entry in real time using an old-fashioned paper notebook. If mystery appointments appeared, she'd have proof that something external was manipulating her calendar. For 3 days, nothing unusual happened. Every entry matched. Sarah started to relax. Maybe it was just stress creating false memories. But on August 21st, her experiment fell apart. Sarah woke up at 6:30 a.m. and found a new event scheduled for that very day. Estate planning consultation, Caldwell and Associates, 11 a.m. She frantically flipped through her notebook. Nothing. She hadn't written it down because she hadn't created it. The event had appeared overnight at a law firm she'd never heard of. Sarah called the firm. A cheerful receptionist confirmed she had an 11 a.m. appointment. "We received your inquiry form 2 weeks ago," the woman said. "You indicated it was somewhat urgent, so Mr. Caldwell made sure to fit you in quickly." Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Can you tell me what I wrote? What was urgent?" There was a pause, the sound of clicking keys. "You mentioned wanting to ensure your affairs were in order, that you'd been having some health concerns and wanted to be prepared." Sarah canceled the appointment, her voice steady even as her mind raced. But after she hung up, she sat frozen. She hadn't sent an inquiry form. She hadn't mentioned health concerns to anyone except Dr. Morrison, and that was only a week ago. The timeline didn't make sense, unless whatever was happening had started earlier than she realized. Sarah opened her laptop and did something she should have done weeks ago. She checked the trash folder in her calendar. Deleted events sometimes lingered there for 30 days. What she found made her breath catch. Dozens of entries, deleted but still visible, stretching back to early July. Initial consultation, Dr. Ellis, July 8th. MRI scan, Cedars-Sinai imaging, July 15th. Biopsy review, Dr. Ellis, July 22nd. Each event was marked as attended. Each had confirmation emails. Each came with detailed notes, Her own words, apparently, describing symptoms, test results, prognoses. According to these deleted calendar entries, she'd been seeing an oncologist. She'd had scans. She'd been diagnosed with something serious, but she had no memory of any of it. None. She'd been at home those days, working, living her normal life. She checked her email trash folder. The confirmations were there too, from medical offices she'd never visited. She checked her credit card statements. No charges from any of these places. No co-pays, no parking fees, nothing. It was as if someone had created an entire parallel medical history for her, complete with documentation, but none of it had actually happened. Or had it? Sarah's rational mind fought against what she was seeing. This had to be a hack. Someone had gained access to her accounts and was gaslighting her. But who? And why? Hackers wanted money or data, not to fill someone's calendar with fake medical appointments. Then she considered another possibility, one that made her feel sick. What if it wasn't fake? What if she had attended these appointments and simply couldn't remember? That night, Sarah couldn't eat. Tom attributed it to work stress. The kids were loud at dinner, and Sarah excused herself early. She locked herself in the bathroom and Googled conditions that cause memory loss in young adults. The results terrified her. Early onset Alzheimer's, brain tumors, severe dissociative disorders. Each possibility felt like a trap door opening beneath her feet. She made a decision. Tomorrow, she would call every medical office in those deleted calendar entries. She would ask if they had records of her visits. She would demand proof, either that she'd been there and forgotten, or that someone was creating an elaborate fiction. She needed to know which reality she was living in. Sarah started making calls at 8 a.m. on August 22nd. The first number, Dr. Ellis, the oncologist, went to voicemail. The second, Cedars-Sinai Imaging, was disconnected. The third, a hematology clinic, had never heard of her. But the fourth call changed everything. The receptionist at Portland Memorial's outpatient oncology center paused when Sarah gave her name. Yes, Ms. Whitmore, you were here on July 22nd for a consultation with Dr. Ellis. Let me pull up your file. Sarah's living room tilted. Can you describe what I came in for? The receptionist's tone shifted, becoming gentler. I'm not able to discuss medical details over the phone, but I see Dr. Ellis ordered follow-up imaging. Did you need to reschedule? Sarah hung up. She hung up because she couldn't breathe, couldn't reconcile what she'd just heard with what she knew to be true. On July 22nd, she'd been home. She'd had a video call with her team at 10 a.m., lunch with Emma at noon, and picked up Tom's dry cleaning at 3 p.m. She had witnesses. She had the credit card receipt. She had time-stamped messages from work Slack. She knew with absolute certainty that she had not been at an oncology center. And yet, they had records. Official medical records. Sarah pulled up her calendar history. In her current calendar, July 22nd showed her normal activities, but in the deleted entries, there was that other appointment. Biopsy review, Dr. Ellis, Portland Memorial, 2 p.m. 2 calendars, 2 versions of the same day, both claiming to be real. She tried to think rationally. Medical identity theft. Maybe someone was using her insurance. That made more sense. Sarah called her insurance company and spent 40 minutes reaching a claims representative. I need to check if there are any recent claims submitted under my name that I didn't authorize. The representative clicked through her account. I see several claims from July and August. She listed them. July 8th, Dr. Ellis consultation. July 15th, MRI scan. July 22nd, biopsy procedure. August 12th, Dr. Morrison. Every appointment from her deleted calendar entries. These all show as processed and paid. Your out-of-pocket costs were covered by your deductible. Is there an issue? I wasn't at any of those appointments, Sarah said, her voice hollow. The representative's tone became bureaucratic. Ma'am, these claims all have signed consent forms with your signature. If you believe this is fraud, you'll need to file a police report. But medical identity theft usually shows up as services that benefit the thief. Prescriptions, expensive procedures, diagnostic consultations don't fit that pattern. After the call, Sarah did something desperate. She drove to Portland Memorial and walked into the medical records department. She requested copies of all files associated with her name. The clerk said records requests took 3 to 5 business days to process. Sarah filled out the forms with shaking hands. Tom found her sitting in the driveway an hour later, still in the car, staring at nothing. She told him everything. The calendar entries she didn't remember, the deleted appointments, the medical records claiming she'd been places she knew she hadn't been. She expected alarm. Instead, he looked confused. "Sarah, we talked about this. You've been stressed about your health. You saw Dr. Morrison a couple weeks ago. She said everything was fine. But I didn't remember making that appointment," Sarah insisted. Tom sat beside her. "Honey, you've been forgetting a lot of things lately. Emma asked me last week why you'd forgotten about her science project. You've been distracted. The pandemic has been hard on everyone, especially you." Sarah felt like she was drowning. Tom wasn't gaslighting her. He genuinely believed what he was saying. He'd watched her schedule appointments, forget about them, and be surprised by them later. From his perspective, this was just increasing forgetfulness. But Sarah knew something else was happening. She just couldn't prove it. That night, she set up her phone to record herself while she slept. What if she was sleepwalking? Creating calendar entries unconsciously. The next morning, she reviewed 7 hours of footage. She slept peacefully, never getting up, never touching her phone. And yet, when she checked her calendar, there it was. Final documents review. Caldwell and Associates, September 3rd, 10 a.m. The estate planning attorney again. The word final felt loaded with meaning. Sarah started crying, deep, body-shaking sobs. Tom held her and suggested a mental health day. "We'll find you someone who specializes in stress-related memory issues. You're going to be okay." But Sarah wasn't sure. When she checked her email after Tom left, she found a message from the Portland Memorial's medical records department. Her files were ready for pickup. She grabbed her keys, not sure if she wanted to know the truth. The envelope was thick, sealed with the hospital stamp. Sarah signed for it and sat in her car with the engine running. Inside were 47 pages of medical documentation spanning July through August 2021. The first document was an intake form dated July 7th. The handwriting was hers. She recognized every loop and curve. She'd listed symptoms: persistent fatigue, unexplained weight loss, night sweats, increasing forgetfulness. Sarah stared at those words. She had no memory of writing them, but it was definitely her handwriting. The next page was Dr. Ellis's notes from their consultation. Clinical, detailed, describing a woman who was frightened and seeking answers. The notes referenced abnormal blood work from her physical in March, the one she remembered. But the lab results were dated from late June. Tests she didn't remember showed elevated markers that concerned Dr. Ellis enough to order imaging. Sarah's vision blurred as she read through MRI reports, biopsy results, pathology findings. According to these documents, she had a rare brain tumor. Small, operable, but growing in a location that could explain her memory problems. The neurologist's notes specifically mentioned temporal lobe involvement consistent with patients' reported anterograde amnesia. The medical language was dense, but Sarah understood enough. They were saying her brain was failing, that the tumor was causing her to forget experiences almost as they happened, that she was living through moments and losing them immediately. And according to the final document, a surgery consent form dated August 19th, she had agreed to an operation scheduled for September 30th. September 30th, the date marked the end in her calendar. Sarah dropped the papers. This couldn't be real. She felt fine. But the documents were official. The signatures matched. The jargon was too specific to be fabricated. Either this was impossible fraud, or she was losing her mind in real time. She called Dr. Ellis's office. A nurse accessed her file immediately. "Ms. Whitmore, we've been trying to reach you. You missed your pre-operative consultation last Friday. We need to reschedule before your surgery." Sarah's mouth was dry. "Can you tell me what's wrong with me?" The nurse paused. "You should discuss this with Dr. Ellis, but according to your chart, you have a grade 2 oligodendroglioma in your left temporal lobe. It's affecting your memory formation. The surgery is to remove as much as possible while preserving function. Your prognosis is actually quite good if we proceed as scheduled." Sarah thanked her and hung up. Then she screamed, a raw sound that fogged up the windows. She screamed until her throat hurt, until panic transformed into cold determination. She drove home and pulled up every file, every photo, every piece of documentation from the past 3 months. She cross-referenced credit card statements with her calendar. She checked her phone's location history. And slowly, she found the gaps. Days where her cards showed no activity, even though she'd supposedly been places. Afternoons where her phone's GPS had her at home, but medical records claimed she was across town. The evidence was contradictory, impossible. 2 versions of her life, both claiming to be true. Tom came home and found her surrounded by papers. "Sarah, you need to stop. This obsession is making things worse." But Sarah shook her head. "Tom, have you noticed anything medically off about me?" He sat down, weary. "You've been tired, stressed. You forget things more. But that's normal. The pandemic has been brutal. You're not dying. You're exhausted and anxious, and you need help." What if he was wrong? What if the medical records were real, and her memories were fiction? What if the tumor had progressed so far that she couldn't trust her own perception? Sarah looked at her calendar. September 14th, the funeral home, was 6 days away. September 30th, the surgery, followed soon after. These events were moving toward her whether she remembered creating them or not. She made a decision. She would attend the September 14th appointment. She would go to that funeral home and see what was there. If it was a mistake, she'd know. If it was real, she'd deal with it. She needed to stop being passive. That night, Sarah barely slept. When she did, she dreamed of that green-walled room again. But this time, she saw what was on the documents she was signing. Funeral arrangements for herself, dated September 30th, 2021. September 14th arrived cold and overcast. Sarah told Tom she had a work meeting and drove to the address. The funeral home was a modest Victorian building painted cream and gray, Riverside Memorial Services. She sat in her car for 10 minutes before walking inside. The lobby smelled like lilacs, the same smell from her dreams. A woman greeted her warmly. "Ms. Whitmore, conference room B is just down the hall." The room had pale green walls, the room from her dreams. A counselor named Patricia specialized in advanced care planning. "I understand this is difficult," Patricia said gently, "but taking control of these decisions now is one of the kindest things you can do for your family." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were preliminary funeral plans created according to specifications submitted 3 weeks ago. Music choices, flower preferences, plot 227, already purchased. Sarah's voice strangled. "I didn't make these plans." Patricia's expression didn't change. "Many people don't remember scheduling these consultations. The mind protects us from difficult truths, but you've been in communication with us since mid-August." She showed Sarah an email chain, detailed, specific, all from Sarah's address, referencing her diagnosis and her desire to spare her family. The emails were dated from times when Tom could confirm she'd been asleep beside him. Sarah excused herself and locked herself in the bathroom. She called Dr. Morrison. "I need the truth," Sarah said, shaking. "Am I dying? Do I have a tumor? Because I have medical records that say yes, but no memory of any of it. There was a long pause. Sarah, we talked about this during our last session. You've been experiencing severe health anxiety compounded by pandemic isolation. You've been researching symptoms, which spiraled into a conviction that you have serious problems. But all your actual tests came back normal. You're physically healthy. Then explain the records from Portland Memorial, Sarah demanded. Another pause. Sarah, Portland Memorial has no record of you as a patient. I checked after you mentioned it. Whatever documents you're looking at aren't legitimate. You need to come in today. We need to increase your medication and possibly consider inpatient evaluation. Sarah hung up. She stood in that bathroom, staring at her reflection, and realized with sudden, terrible clarity what was happening. She wasn't dying from a tumor. She was dying from something else, a breakdown so complete that she'd created an entire alternate reality. The calendar entries, the medical records, the emails, her own mind had generated them so convincingly that she couldn't separate truth from delusion. The funeral home, the estate planning, the surgery that would never come. She'd built an entire narrative of terminal illness because some broken part of her needed to make sense of the confusion, the lost time, the feeling that her life was slipping away. The pandemic isolation hadn't just stressed her, it had fractured her grasp on reality itself. Sarah left without signing anything. She drove home, slowly, carefully. Tom was waiting with a packed bag. Emma's at my mom's, he said quietly. Dr. Morrison called. She thinks you need intensive help. I found a facility that specializes in stress-induced psychosis, dissociative episodes. They can help you, but you have to want to get better. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt relief. Not happiness. The situation was too heavy. But relief that there was a path forward. The calendar entries, she whispered. The appointments. Was any of it real? Tom pulled her close. Some was real. You did see Dr. Morrison. You did start having anxiety. But you took that anxiety and ran with it. You created documentation to support what you were feeling. Your mind was trying to give you a reason for feeling lost. But you're not dying. You're just really unwell. And we're going to fix that. Sarah spent 3 months at a residential treatment facility. She was diagnosed with severe pandemic-related anxiety disorder with dissociative features, affecting thousands whose mental health had collapsed under isolation and uncertainty. Her brain, desperate for structure, had created elaborate false memories complete with documentation. She'd written the emails, created the entries, convinced herself so thoroughly the memories felt real. By Christmas 2021, Sarah was home. She still used a calendar, but kept it simple, just the basics, double-checked with Tom. She'd learned to live with uncertainty, with the knowledge that her mind could betray her. September 30th came and went. She was alive, healthy, slowly rebuilding trust in her own perception. But sometimes, late at night, Sarah still wonders. She wonders about Plot 227, which does exist, purchased by someone else entirely. She wonders about the funeral home that smelled like her dreams, the green-walled room she'd envisioned before seeing it. She wonders if maybe she'd glimpsed a future that was trying to happen, a timeline where her anxiety became self-fulfilling prophecy. Her therapist says these thoughts are part of recovery, the mind's attempt to narrativize trauma. Sarah mostly agrees, but she never deleted that final calendar entry, the one marked September 30th. It still sits in her trash folder, marked attended, waiting to be erased. And sometimes, when no one's looking, she opens it and reads the notes she supposedly wrote. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Sarah closes the laptop and reminds herself, she's here. She's alive. The calendar was wrong. But a small part of her, the part that remembers living in 2 timelines at once, wonders if somewhere, in some version of September 2021, she did attend that final appointment after all.